Okay, so let's see. Today's lecture is about zero-sum games. And there's a beautiful algorithm called multiplicative weight updates. Okay, I'm sort of having some trouble again with this. Let me just give me 1 moment. I'm going to restart. Okay, so let me just open up another set of notes here. I'll stop. Okay, so that's working well. And let me just share the screen now with you. Okay, so can you see the screen? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I was having trouble with this app. So let me start again. So today's lecture will be about zero-sum games and multiplicative weight updates. Okay, so zero-sum games are a very simple type of game, which are related in a very interesting way to linear programming. And then this multiplicative weight update algorithm is, again, it's probably one of the simplest algorithms you'll see, but it's also one of the most useful algorithms. So it's a very interesting combination there. Okay. So what's a zero-sum game? So it's a two-person. It's usually called a two-person zero-sum game. Okay. So could be a game like chess or Go, where it's a purely competitive game where whatever one player wins, the other one loses. So in that sense, it's zero-sum, right? So now this is, there are many situations in life that you can regard as a game, and many of these situations are not zero-sum. They are cooperative games where you're playing with somebody, and there are many ways in which you can both be winners at the end of it, right? And that's a very important aspect of life. Zero-sum games are a very specific kind of game where it's purely competitive, right? Where whatever you win, the other person loses. So now, why do we study it? Because they're very simple and you can completely analyze them, and it gives you a great deal of insight into a very interesting phenomenon. So probably the most sort of iconic two-person zero-sum game is rock, paper, scissors. And to describe the game, I'm not sure if you realized this when you played the game, but the way to describe it is by a matrix. So the game is described like this. There's a 3x3 matrix where there are 3 moves that you can make and 3 moves that your opponent can make, rock, paper, or scissors. And then if both of you play the same move, then the payoff is 0. If you play rock and your opponent plays paper, then you get a payoff of -1, meaning you lose. If you play rock and your opponent plays scissors, then you win. Paper versus rock, you win. Paper versus scissors, you lose. Scissors versus rock, you lose. Scissors versus paper, you win. Okay. So we'll think of this as 2 players. So this is Alice playing a row of this matrix. Bob plays a column of the matrix, and then the entry of the matrix is equal to Alice's payoff, which is minus Bob's payoff. Okay, so it's the amount that Alice wins and Bob loses. Okay, so now I'm sure when you play this game, you have various strategies for playing this game. In game theory, in the terms that we are going to talk about, by a strategy we'll mean what you do when you describe to somebody else. It's instructions that you give to somebody else who is going to play on your behalf, right? So it might be, if you want to wait until the other person plays. So for example, if you can somehow trick Bob into playing first, then your strategy would be, well, if Bob plays rock, then you should play paper. If Bob plays paper, then you should play scissors. And if Bob plays scissors, then you should play rock. Okay, so that might be a strategy. But in this 2-person game setting, we want to think about something else, which is what happens if you don't see Bob's move, and you want to come up with your move first. Okay. Well, you could try to say, well, you could announce your move in advance, and you could say, well, I'll play rock. That would be a very bad idea. So instead, what you could tell somebody who's playing on your behalf is some strategy according to which to play. And so a strategy is you should think of as instructions for someone else to play on your behalf. And in this case, if you were giving somebody else instructions on how to play rock, paper, scissors on your behalf, you might say to them, look, as far as I can tell, the best thing to do is pick rock, paper, scissors with equal probability. Right? So you might say, strategy, probability of rock equal to probability of paper is equal to probability of scissors equal to 1/3. That's a strategy. And Or you could say, well, maybe you might give this strategy. Maybe you would decide, well, probability of rock is equal to probability of scissors is equal to 1/2. That might be another strategy you announce. So suppose you tell your representative to play with this second strategy. How should Bob react to this? What would Bob do in order to guarantee as big a payoff as possible? Well, so here's what Bob would do. Bob would say, well, look, if I play rock, my expected payoff, so Alice is going to play rock with probability 1/2 and scissor with probability 1/2, and that's never going to be played. So now from Bob's viewpoint, if Bob were to play rock, then with probability 1/2, he would win 0, and with probability 1/2, he would win 1, right? He'd lose -1, which is winning 1. So Bob's payoff is, the expected payoff is 1/2, because with probability 1/2, you get payoff of 1. If Bob plays paper, then the payoff is 50% -1, 50% 1, so it's 0. And with scissors, the payoff is, again, with probability 1/2, Alice wins 1, and so Bob loses 1. And with probability 1/2, 0. So the payoff is -1/2 for Bob. So clearly, if you're in Bob's role, what you would do is you play rock. On the other hand, if you work it out for this strategy, it doesn't matter what you would play as Bob, because in each of these 3 cases, your payoff would be 0. Expected payoff would be 0. And so that really sounds like an optimal strategy for Alice to actually use. Okay, so this, what we are concerned with here in this idea is what's the best strategy that Alice can use if she were to go first? What's the best strategy that Bob would go with if he were to move first? And in each of these 2 cases, what would the payoff for Alice be if the other person plays optimally? Okay. I just want to stop to see if there's a quick question about the setup, about what the game is.
No questions yet.
Okay, great. Actually, it's also a quick question to see how many people have seen zero-sum games already. So have you seen the game or this topic, or not seen the game? If you can just say quickly in chat, so I get a quick sense. Sorry, and if you are looking at chat,
maybe let's do it with the buttons, yes, no buttons, the participants.
It looks more or less half and half.
Okay, great. Yeah, excellent. Okay. Okay, so now let me describe one more game, which is we'll think of it as an even-odd game. Okay, so let's say that that Alice and Bob pick a number. So let's say they pick a number 0, 1, 0, 1, and then their payoff is according to the sum of the 2 numbers picked. So if it turns out to be an even number, then Alice wins the sum. Alice's payoff is the sum of the numbers, and if the sum is odd, then Alice loses the sum. Okay, so Alice and Bob both pick a number, And if sum even, then Alice's payoff equal to the sum. If odd, then Alice's payoff is equal to minus the sum, meaning she loses the sum. So for example, here 0 plus 0 is 0, so Alice wins 0. 0 plus 1 is 1, so Alice loses 1. 1 plus 0 is 1, so Alice loses 1. And 1 plus 1 is 2, so Alice wins 2. Okay. So now, again, you know, if Alice moves first, what should she do? Well, if she picks row 0, if she picks a 0, then Bob would obviously pick a 1, and he'd win 1. If she picks 1, then Bob would pick 0, and he'd still win 1. If Bob goes first, if he picks 0, Alice would choose 0, and they'd be even. If he goes first and picks a 1, then Bob would pick a 1. Alice would pick a 1, and she'd win 2. Okay, is it clear what the game is? Okay, but now Alice wants to give instructions on how to play. Okay, so what's, you know, if Alice was to give instructions and pick a probability distribution, so she'd pick 0 with probability x0, 1 with probability x1. So now what's Bob's payoff? So she picks 0 with probability x0, 1 with probability x1. And now we want to see Bob's payoff. So what's it going to be? Well, if he plays 0, if Bob plays 0, then his payoff will be, well, his payoff is, you know, then let's see. Let me just write it in the terms that it's given in the matrix, so it's easier to see. So Alice's payoff, which is what we read off the matrix, if Bob plays 0, is going to be x0 times 0 plus x1 times minus 1. Right? Okay, I should just have written it as minus x1. And if Bob plays 1, then it's going to be this, right? So it's going to be minus x0 plus 2x1. Okay, now Bob's no fool. So what does he want to do? He wants to minimize Alice's payoff. So obviously what Bob wants to do is he's going to choose the minimum of minus x1 and minus x0 plus 2x1. So let me give you an example. So suppose she picked x0 equal to 1/3 and or x0 equal to 2/3 and x1 equal to 1/3. Okay. So now what are these two payoffs? Well, we want the minimum of these two payoffs. So if Bob plays 0, then the payoff is minus 1/3, meaning Alice loses 1/3. If Bob plays 1, then it's minus 2/3 plus 2 times 1/3, which is 0. right? So it's the minimum of minus 1/3 and 0, which is minus 1/3. Okay, so she loses 1/3. Now notice she's already doing better than committing to either 0 or 1. Right? Can she do any better? Well, it turns out she can do better. She can do, so what does she want to do? So she knows that Bob's strategy is to take the minimum of these two things. So now what Alice wants to do pick x0, x1 to maximize this quantity. This is what she is going to win. So so Bob is trying to minimize, so he picks whatever is the minimum of these two. So now Alice is going to pick x0, x1 to maximize the min of minus x1 and minus x0 plus 2x1. Okay, so how do we actually doesn't this scream out linear programming? Well, let's see how to do that. We want to maximize the minimum of these two. Well, how do we write the minimum of these two things? Well, we introduce a dummy variable or slack variable, and we say, to say that it's smaller than the minimum of these two, we say, well, we introduce a variable z, and we say z must be less than or equal to minus x1, and z also must be less than or equal to minus x0 plus 2x1. Right? If we write out these two inequalities, this says z must be less than or equal to the min of minus x1 and minus x0 plus 2x1. It could be smaller, but it can't be any larger than the minimum of the two, right? Because it's smaller than the first, it's smaller than the second, so it must be smaller than both, the minimum of the two. But now we want to maximize. We want to maximize z, right? We want to maximize this, so we say maximize z, because that's what Alice wants to do. But once you're maximizing z subject to z less than or equal to min of these two things say that z must actually be equal to the min of minus x1 and minus x0 plus 2x1, right? So this, these two inequalities tell us that z must be smaller than or equal to, but since we are maximizing, it must be actually the minimum. But now, okay, but now x1 and x0 are free right now, but these are supposed to be probabilities. So x0 plus x1 must be equal to 1, and x0 and x1 must be at least 0. And this is our LP. Okay. And if you go ahead and solve this LP, then you'll find out the optimum strategy, which is, so the opt in this case is x0 equal to 3/4 and x1 equal to 1/4. And in this case, what will happen is that the payoff is minus 1/4, meaning the best thing Alice can do if she announces a strategy is lose 1/4. Okay, so that's her expected loss every time she plays. Okay, so let me stop here to see if there's a question.
Okay, we have one question from Che, and I might be saying your name completely wrong. So please correct me.
Hi, Professor. So Alice can maximize this quantity, but Bob, knowing that Alex will maximize this quantity, can he also try to minimize what Alex will maximize and so on? Would the result just oscillate, or would I reach an equilibrium?
Well, Alice is just, Alice has decided on a strategy, right? We may as well assume that Alice even announced in advance, look, this is how I'm going to play, right? I'm just going to pick 0 with probability x0, 1 with probability x1. Everybody knows this, right? So now Bob knows this. So he's trying to figure out, how should I play? Well, so he says, look, if I play 0, then I'm going to, this is what Alice is going to win, minus x1. If I play 1, then this is what Alice is going to win, minus x0 plus 2x1. Which one do I prefer? Well, obviously the min of the two, because whatever Alice wins, I lose. So I want it to be as small as possible. So that's why Bob picks the min. Okay. Now,
yeah, that makes sense.
And now Alice knows, she announced this. She knows Bob's no fool. So he's going to do the min of these two, right? That's what he's going to make sure she wins. So now she knows she's going to win the min of these two. Now she wants to choose x0 and x1 so that this is as large as possible, right? Okay, so then that's the unique solution, right? That gives us a unique solution. And how do we get that solution? We write down the LP.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I think we have another clarifying question about the definition of the games and whether or not Alice is expected. Please, whoever asked this question, please feel free to clarify what you mean, but what the expected payoff is if Alice is not expected to announce it beforehand. Maybe that means if your strategy is secret versus public. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so look, it's sort of simple, right? At the end of the day, when you play, Alice has made a move, Bob has made a move, right? And then the payoff is, exactly whichever entry corresponds to those moves. So if Alice made the move 0, Bob made the move 1, the matrix entry tells you, what did Alice win? She won -1, meaning she lost. She loses 1, Bob wins 1. Okay. Now, Alice could choose, she could say, look, I'm going to announce a strategy. I have a strategy. I'm going to pick according to this probability distribution. Okay. Now, how much will she win? Well, it depends upon how well Bob plays. But if Bob plays optimally, then he's going to make sure that she wins exactly this computation that we made, right? The min of these two. And now, if Alice says, well, Bob's going to play optimally, how do I make sure I win as much as possible with this strategy? Well, so she takes the max of this. And now what she's saying is, with this strategy, 3/4, 1/4, she can rest assured that no matter how well Bob plays, she's guaranteed a payoff, expected payoff of -1/4. She's not going to do worse than this. Of course, if Bob messes up, she could do better. Right? But if Bob plays optimally, she'll do at least this well. Okay. And among all strategies that she could announce in advance, this is the best one. Right? In the sense that if Bob is playing optimally, this is going to guarantee her the most.
Thank you.
Okay. So now, now we can look at this game also from Bob's viewpoint. So suppose Bob announces that he's going to play these with y0, y1. So now Bob announces strategy. Y0, Y1. Okay. And now we look at Alice's payoff. Well, what's Alice's payoff? Well, if she plays 0, then her payoff is minus Y1. And if she plays 1, her payoff is minus Y0 plus 2Y1. And so what's Alice trying to do? Well, she's trying to maximize her payoff. So what she should do is she should pick the maximum of minus Y1 and Y0 minus Y0 plus 2Y1. That's what she should do. And then Bob, of course, is trying to minimize her payoff. So what he'll do, so now Bob, clearly what he should do is pick Y0 and Y1 such that the max of minus Y1 and minus Y0 plus 2Y1 is minimized. Right? So he wants to pick it so that this maximum is as small as possible. Okay. So again, you can write it as an LP. So how would you write it? You would write minus Y0 minus Y1 less than or equal to Z, minus Y0 plus 2 Y1 less than or equal to Z. Okay. And what do we want to do? We want to minimize Z. Okay. And of course, we have the conditions Y0 plus Y1 equal to 1, Y0 and Y1 greater than or equal to 0. So that's our LP. And again, if you solve it, you would see that the solution is Y0 equal to 3/4 and Y1 equal to 1/4. And the payoff again is exactly minus 1/4. So this is Alice's payoff is minus 1/4. So it seems like what we have here is Alice can announce her best strategy and then say, how well am I guaranteed to do? And the answer is minus 1/4. And Bob can announce his best strategy and he can ask, well, how well he can expect to do? And the answer is still 1/4. This is a special instance of what's called the min-max theorem. This is the famous von Neumann's min-max theorem. So to understand this a little better, let's actually write out these strategies a little bit better. So how did we actually derive this LP in terms of, let's write out this matrix A, which is the payoff matrix of the game, of the two-person game. Okay, so the way we derive this is sort of like this. You write out A, 0, -1, -1, 2, and you multiply it by Y, Y0, Y1. And what do you get here? Well, you get minus Y1 and minus Y0 plus 2Y1. Right? So another way of writing this this linear program. So essentially what this means is another way you could write out this linear program is you want to say A times Y is less than or equal to, well, Z. Y0 plus Y1, which is another way of saying all this is, if you want, you can put this whole thing in matrix notation by just saying, well, the all ones vector transpose, the all ones vector, well, I already transposed it. So, just writing it as a row vector times Y is equal to 1. So if I'm going to write it in terms of the all ones vector, then I would write it as all ones vector 1, 1 times Z. Sorry, you know what I meant by saying the all ones vector. In this case, we are working in 2 dimensions. So by the all ones vector, I just mean 1, 1. Okay. And then we also have that Y as a vector is greater than or equal to 0. And then what are we doing? We are minimizing Z. Okay. Now, if you were to look at what we did on the previous page, when we wrote our LP from Alice's viewpoint, so we wrote down this LP, and that LP ends up being what? Well, in that case, we are looking at A times X, except we want X to be a row vector. So we look at it as A times X transpose. And sorry, maybe I'll just do the example instead. I'll show it to you in the example. So there what we did was we looked at A. Okay. And we looked at Alice picks X1, X2. And then this was, sorry, I'm going to move it a little bit. Okay. So these were the 2 payoffs, right? Minus X1 and minus X0 plus 2X2 that Bob was trying to pick the minimum of when Alice played first. Okay. So the way you get that is by saying, well, you look at X transpose A. We want this to be greater than or equal to Z times 1, 1. And then we have the constraints on X, which is X0 plus X1 equal to 1. So that's the same thing as 1, 1 times X is equal to 1. X is greater than or equal to 0. And this time we want to maximize Z. Okay. So the main point is that these 2 linear programs are duals of each other. And you can write this, I just wrote this for this specific 2x2 zero-sum game, but actually you can write it for any zero-sum game, not just this particular one, not just a 2x2, but this now, once you write it in this matrix notation, it just shows you a general prescription for how you can write down this LP for any game, for any 2-person game where where Alice can make one of n moves and where Bob can make one of m moves. And what you end up saying is that these two are duals of each other, and therefore they have the same value. The max value for this left LP is exactly the same as the min value for the right LP. And what that means is that if Alice announces her strategy in advance and she says, I'm going to pick the following probability distribution over the rows of the matrix, the moves that I can make, and I'll announce them in advance, and I'll pick them according to whatever is the optimal strategy that this linear program gives me. And then she says to Bob, well, do your worst against it, right? Pick your best strategy. I'm just announcing this in advance. Then she'll do exactly as well as if Bob announced his strategy in advance. And he said, I'm going to pick the following probability distribution over my moves, which are columns of this matrix. Right? I'll pick the following probability distribution, and I'm telling you that in advance. Do your worst. Okay, so Alice now picks whatever is the best move she can make. And basically the two values are exactly the same. And that's von Neumann's min-max theorem. Okay. So the story about this is actually very interesting. So back in 1947, George Danzig, who invented the simplex method, he was visiting the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. And he went in to talk to von Neumann to tell him about his discoveries. And so he started talking to him as though he was talking to an ordinary mortal. And so he described the linear programming problem by describing it as the Air Force problem, where you're writing this linear program to optimize certain activities and items and so on. And von Neumann did something sort of uncharacteristic for him, where he said, George Danzig had just started describing this when von Neumann said to him, get to the point. And so, George Danzig was a little bit peeved at that. So he himself reacted in an uncharacteristic manner. So he said, well, if he wants it fast, let me give it to him really fast. So in 1 minute, he described to him both the geometric and the algebraic formulation of linear programs. And he said, okay, that's what I'm talking about. So at which point von Neumann got up and he went to the board and he gave George Danzig a 1.5-hour lecture on the mathematical theory of linear programming and of duality. And this was all completely new to George Danzig. So he says that, in his memoirs he was writing that he had searched through the literature and he had seen nothing at all like this that appeared anywhere. And so what George Danzig said is that, at some point during this whole event, he was just sitting there, his eyes were popping, and his mouth had dropped, his jaw had dropped. And von Neumann said to him, I don't want you to think that I'm pulling this out of my sleeve like a magician. Actually, what's happened, I've recently completed my book with Morgenstern on the theory of games. And so what I'm speculating is that the kind of duality theory that happens there actually also happens for linear programs. And so, of course, he was completely right, and all the, everything that he had sketched out there completely extempore was completely right. And but that was George Danzig talking to, I think, for what many people think of as arguably the greatest mathematician of the 20th century. So okay, so that was the story. And so basically, you have this deep connection between two-person zero-sum games and linear programming duality. Okay, so let me stop and see if there are any questions.
I'm not seeing any questions come up right now. There was one question about how you're lining up the vectors X and Y and the matrix A, and how the dimensions are changing when you convert from the dual to the primal, or vice versa, where you have a different number of variables. Maybe here it's a symmetrical example, but a question came up about why it's X transpose times A versus A times Y.
Well, you see, so let's see. Let's.
But whether or not we should prioritize discussing this versus something else is totally up to you, obviously.
Well, let me talk about something that I would maybe that's worth talking about, and it'll answer this question at the same point. So you see, A is okay. So let's say that A was not a rectangular matrix, right? So now Alice is going to pick one of the rows, right? So she's going to pick, let's say, one of these 4 or 5 rows of the matrix, and so her choice of X is going to be just as big as that. So this length should be equal to that one, right? And so you should put X transpose here. Whereas Bob is going to pick one of these columns here. Oh, sorry, one of these columns, and there are many of those. And so Y is going to sit out here, right? Its length is exactly as much as the number of columns, right? That's your payoff matrix A. And then the payoff is exactly X transpose AY is the payoff when Alice plays X and Bob plays Y. Right? In particular, if Alice happened to pick not a probability, general, if she picked one point, one of the rows, right? So if X was one of the basis vectors, so they all entry 0 except one of them, and Bob picked a basis vector, then X transpose AY would just isolate a single entry of A. And that's exactly the payoff, right? So Alice plays that row, Bob plays that column, and this is the, so the payoff is exactly that entry, and that's X transpose AY.
No other questions.
So von Neumann's min-max theorem then just says min over Y max over X of X transpose AY is the same as max over X min Y of X transpose AY. So it doesn't matter who goes first, right? Alice can announce in advance or Bob can announce in advance. It's all the same. You get the same value. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay, So, okay, so now let me turn to the second topic I wanted to talk about, which is the multiplicative weights update algorithm. So this is a very simple, beautiful algorithm. It's been rediscovered many times by many different communities. It was discovered by economists, by people working on algorithms, by people working in computational learning theory. It's been applied widely in machine learning. It's sort of a very beautiful, very general purpose trick. And okay, so what does this look like? So it says, look, suppose you have n experts. E1, E2, E7. And these are sort of self-professed experts on the internet. You don't know, what you believe is that at least one of them is a true expert, but who knows, some of them might just be charlatans, and maybe even all of them are, but you don't know. Let's say that you are using, that you're hoping one of them really knows what they're doing. And maybe you're a day trader and you want to get their advice. They give their advice every day for a certain stock that you want to invest in. And each day you would, if you knew which one to listen to, then of course you would invest each day, and then at the end of the day you would figure out how much you had made, and you would repeat this cycle, every day of the year. But of course you have no idea who is who here, right? So what you'd like to do is try to come up with an algorithm according to which you would do your investment, so that at the end of the year you would do almost as well as if you had known in advance who was the best expert there. Okay. Now you'll notice that, so in this situation, it may even be the case that actually, there isn't even a best expert to begin with. All of these people have their own theories about how the market works, and they're just trying their best. All of them are well-meaning, none of them are charlatans, but of course, there's no guarantee about how the market works. So it could also be that these are all perfectly valid ways of playing the market. But what you would like is a really what sounds like an impossible guarantee. So what you would like is that you're going to follow this algorithm by, sort of picking between these experts every day. And you might switch your mind, through the course of the year. Every day you might pick a different expert, or you might, you do it according to some strategy. But what you want is that at the end of the year, magically, you do at least as well as the best of them. So in advance, nobody knew that there was even, who was the best. Nobody knew which theory about the market would work best. But you want a retroactive guarantee that you're doing as well or almost as well as the best one of these experts. And so the multiplicative weight algorithm sort of guarantees this for you. So in the literature, it's usually it's convention to to think of, instead of talking about the gain that you make every day, we think about the loss that you make every day. Maybe because we are pessimistic about the stock market or betting on it. I'm not sure why, but okay. So you can write everything in terms of gains, but we'll write them in terms of losses. So let's say that each day, if you choose to follow the advice of the ith expert, so if you choose the ith expert on day number t, then you suffer a loss of L sub I of t, which is a number between 0 and 1. Okay, and we are going to play for t is the total number of days. And let's say that after you play for every day in the morning you invest, and you invest according to the advice that one of these experts gave you. So maybe you pick expert number J on one morning when you wake up, and at the end of the day you suffer whatever loss between 0 and 1, and then it's also revealed to you at the end of the day what every other expert would have suffered, what loss you would have suffered if you had followed every other expert number 1, 2 up to n. And now, after that, based on this information, you can decide what you want to do the following day. Who do you want? Which expert do you want to follow the advice of? And of course, you might decide you want to do follow the advice of the expert who did the best on the previous day. But of course, that would be a really bad strategy if whoever did the best on one day does the worst on the following day. Then you would be lagging by 1, and you would always be doing really poorly. It would be like purchasing the stock that that appreciated most one day, and then you realize the next day it was dropping a lot. Something like that. So how should you decide on your strategy? Okay. So let's say that that L star is the total loss of the best expert over t days. Okay, so we want a strategy that'll give us a total loss, which is ideally less than or equal to L star, but not much larger than L star. Okay, so here's the strategy that we follow. It's a very simple strategy. What you do is you assign a weight to every expert. So let's initialize W sub I equal to 1 for I equal to 1 to n. So these are the initial weights that we have given to all the experts. They're all equal. And we are going to fiddle around with the weights at the end of each day. Now, what do? So on each day, on each day, what we do is pick. Okay, so now, we do this, and we also let W, capital W, be the sum of the W sub i's. Okay, so now on each day, what we do is we select the advice, we go with the advice of expert I, with probability W sub I divided by capital W. Okay. So on the first day, we just choose an expert uniformly at random because we have no information at all. And then at the end of the day, it gets revealed to us what the loss of every expert is, right? So expert J, if we had listened to expert J, then we'd have suffered a loss of L sub J. I'll put a superscript T to say it's on the Tth day. Right? So now what we do is, the more loss an expert suffered, the less confidence we have in that expert. So what we're going to do is we are going to update W sub J to W sub J times 1 minus epsilon to the power of Lj of T. Okay, so the more loss that this expert suffered, the smaller we make the weight. And epsilon is some parameter that we can choose. And it's going to, you know, so epsilon is some parameter which reflects our impatience with experts. So if epsilon is large, that means that we are pretty impatient. You know, if somebody is doing badly, we really just, you know, just decrease the weight very rapidly. And if epsilon is small, then we are willing to be patient, right? And we'll see how the trade-off works out. Okay, so that's the algorithm, right? So we update all the weights, and then in the morning we decide again which expert to pick, and then at the end of the day, every expert suffers a loss, right? The expert we picked suffered a loss which we actually have to pay, but we get to see what it would have been for every other expert, and accordingly we change the weights. And the next day, our algorithm based on the new weights picks an expert, and we keep going. Okay, so let L be our expected loss suffered by this algorithm over the T days. Okay. So now, what would we like to be the case? You know, so our dream theorem would be to show that L is smaller than L star. This would be great, right? If we could show this, that would be fantastic, right? We can almost get that. So we can, you know, what we'll be able to say about multiplicative weight updates is that it almost satisfies this. We have to put a 1 plus epsilon here to say that, okay, so if we are willing to be patient, then we suffer just a tiny extra loss. You know, so if we want to be within 1% of the truly optimal expert, then we choose epsilon to be 1 in 100. That would be good enough. Except that we have to pay a small upfront cost. And the upfront cost is log of n divided by epsilon. Okay, so there are n experts, and so we pay a cost of log n, right, which is tiny compared to the number of experts divided by epsilon.
Is the epsilon the same epsilon from the update?
That's the same epsilon. So this epsilon is exactly the same as that epsilon. So you can see this is it's a pretty remarkable theorem, right? It's a very simple algorithm. All that the algorithm is saying is, look, so what do we know about this, about the setting? So the sense in which it is such a powerful algorithm is because it applies in so many situations. What did we assume? So we assumed very little. We just assumed there were these N experts. We know nothing about them, right? We don't know where they are sitting. They just set up shop on the internet. That's all we know about them. Okay, each of them makes a prediction every day, and then we get to see the outcome at the end of the day. We get to bet according to what these experts predicted. We get to choose whichever expert we want every day. All right, so what did we do? We said, well, on the first day, we don't know them from anybody. So, well, what we'll do is pick one at random. And the way we choose to do this is by assigning a weight to each expert. That's our confidence in that expert. And then we just choose at random an expert according to the weight, right? And at the end of the day, we get to understand how we did because we went according to one of the experts, and also how every other expert did. Right? And then all we do is we update our confidence in each expert according to how well they did that day. And what we are just tuning. So instead of saying, well, our confidence went down to 0 or it went to 1, what we do is just we tune it a little bit, right? So if the person did very badly, we push the confidence down. If they did not badly, then we leave the way it was, right? And over time, what will happen is the experts who are doing well will tend to have larger weights than experts who are not doing well. And so we'll be going with the ones that are doing well. But the point is, it's not enough for us to go with experts who did well in the past. What we want is experts who do well in the future, right? And the point is, by doing well, by going with the experts according to how they've been doing in the past, we can guarantee that over the course of the entire thing, we'll do pretty well. How well? Well, that's the theorem. Okay, so now you have two choices. If you want to slow me down, ask a question. If not, I'll give you a sketch of the proof in the next 5 minutes.
There's a question of how to pick an epsilon parameter.
How do you pick the, so that's, you just pick it according to the theorem, right? So the theorem sort of tells you, you see what guarantee you would like. There's a trade-off here. The bigger you pick epsilon, the smaller this first term is going to be, log n over epsilon, but the bigger this 1 plus epsilon factor is going to be. So there's a trade-off, and you pick according to whether you want a good percentage or whether you want to pay a bigger fixed cost. Okay, so that's the trade-off. Okay, so let me show you how give you a proof sketch. The proof sketch goes like this. So let's let W of t be the sum of the weights on the tth day. Right? Okay, so we started on the first day with the sum of the weights equal to n, right? Because everyone was given a weight of 1. Now, what's the weight? So suppose, what was the weight of the best expert? On day number t, at the end of day t. remember the best expert suffered a loss of L star, right? That was the smallest loss anybody suffered. So what's the weight of the best expert? It's just going to be 1 minus epsilon whole raised to the power of L star. Okay. And so one thing we can say for sure is if we want to look at the total weight of all the experts on the last day, it must be at least 1 minus epsilon to the power of L star. Right? That's clear, right? Because one of the experts has that weight. The other thing you can show so now let's also denote by L sub t the expected loss suffered by the multiplicative weight update algorithm on day t. So then what you can show, and this is sort of a simple manipulation, which is in the notes, that W of t plus 1, the total weight on day t plus 1, is going to be at most the total weight on day t times 1 minus epsilon times the loss, total loss suffered, the expected loss suffered on day t. Okay. So now armed with these two facts, you can say, well, the total weight on day t is bounded below by 1 minus epsilon to the power of L star. But you can also bound it above because you start on day 0 with weight n. Right? This is W on day 0. But now the weight on every successive day drops by 1 minus epsilon times LT. So you can at least. So you get a product of t equal to whatever 1 through t of 1 minus epsilon times LT. Right? Because we know that the weight keeps falling according to this at this rate, and so you can take this you can take this this product and you get the bound. Okay, so now you take logs of both sides. So now this is smaller than W of t is smaller than that. So this this left-hand side is definitely smaller than this right-hand side. So now you take logs of both sides. And so you get L star ln 1 minus epsilon is that less than or equal to ln n plus sum t equal to 0, 1 to t of ln 1 minus epsilon L sub t. And now if you can say, well, this must be greater than or equal to L star times epsilon minus epsilon squared. Okay, so this is just a fact. And this is less than or equal to L of n minus epsilon times summation of L sub t over all t. But summation of L sub t was the expected loss on day sub t. This is the total loss suffered by the expected loss suffered by the multiplicative weight update algorithm. Okay, so what we end up with is L star times 1 minus. Oh, sorry. This is epsilon plus epsilon squared. So you get L star times 1 plus epsilon is the less than or equal to log n over epsilon minus L. And now if you rearrange, this is the same thing as saying L is less than or equal to log n over epsilon. Okay, so you get a minus here, right? Plus 1 plus epsilon times L star. Okay, so that was the bound I was. Okay, so what's the main point here? The main point here is that the proof of this is actually very simple. It relies on some very simple inequalities, but it relies on just keeping track of this weight function. And what's this weight function? Well, it's the weight on all the experts. And what we're saying is you started off with weight 1 everywhere. And then over time, what happens is that the weight drops according to how much loss each expert suffers. But the one who, the optimum expert, right, the best expert, the weight doesn't drop by very much. And so that weight is going to be relatively large. The total weight is going to drop a lot. And it's going to drop a lot depending upon how much loss we suffer. And so now what we're doing is we are sandwiching these two and saying, well, we certainly couldn't suffer so much loss that we overtake the best expert completely in terms of the total weight. And that gives us a bound on how much total loss we can suffer. Okay. All right, so that's it for this lecture. If you have any questions, please.
Looks like there's one question from Animesh.
Yeah, hi, sorry, Professor. I had a quick question about the algorithm. I noticed that we seem to penalize experts when they lose money, but at the same time, we don't reward them if they have a gain. So for example, if you had an expert with very high gains and very high losses, but the high gains offset the high losses, then they'd be penalized for the losses.
Let me interrupt you there. So you see, I'm assuming that each day, each expert suffers a loss between 0 and 1. So they have no chance of having a gain in this setting, right? We could, we could easily also do the same thing with gains between 0 and 1, or even gains and losses between 1 and -1. It will all work out. But for simplicity, we are assuming that there are only losses here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. By the way, I should say, please take a look at the schedule for the next for this next lecture. It's slightly different. So next time, what I'll do is I'll quickly finish up with say just a little bit more about multiplicative weights and zero-sum games, maybe hopefully for about 15 minutes. And then what I'd like to do is do a little bit of review for the midterm, which is coming up a week from today. And so, okay, so that's the plan for the next lecture.
Looks like there's one more question, two more questions, one from Alberto and then Jonathan.
Hi, I had a quick question about the epsilon. So in choosing that, is there like a function in order to decide, or I guess, okay, I understand it has to do with patience. So my question is, it seems, are we just trying to solve, so given some heuristic for L star, are we trying to like calculate what the optimal epsilon value is, or like kind of in practice, how would you actually like come up with an epsilon, and what are the different criteria you would use to make that decision?
Well, you see, if you look at the total loss that we suffer, L, right? So here's our theorem, right? L is bounded by log n over epsilon plus 1 plus epsilon times L star. So now, if you look at this first term, a small epsilon really hurts us, right? So if you make epsilon, you could say, well, why not make epsilon as small as possible? Well, you can't, right? Because then this blows up. Right? So if you make epsilon 1 in a billion, well, then this becomes a billion log n, right? So you're paying there. But on the other hand, if you as you make epsilon larger, you pay more and more of a cost in terms of how much more than L star a loss you suffer compared to L star. So you want to balance these in some way, right? So you have, if you make epsilon very small, then it helps you over here. You get closer and closer to the loss that the best expert suffers. But
Oh,
now,
I see.
but now you pay in this fixed cost that you're paying, right, in terms of the number of experts.
Got it. And there's no way of knowing that without knowing, because you don't know what L star is, you can't just like solve you can't like take the derivative of a function.
Right. So, but maybe in the problem at hand, you have some, you can certainly bound L star by t, right, the number of days.
Oh, true.
Right. So that would give you a crude bound, and then you could optimize. But maybe you know a little bit more about the problem to say, well, this is what you're hoping L star is not more than this, or whatever it is, and then you can get a meaningful bound.
Got it. Thank you, Professor.
So is the scope of the midterm up to today's lecture?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Let's say, I would say that the scope of the lecture is all the way through zero-sum games.
Okay, thank you so much.
So this multiplicative weight updates, maybe we need a little more time for it to sink in. So let's say that's not in scope.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.